And so we're just going to talk a little bit. We're going to race through a long chunk of Scripture, and then we're going to slow down and take a look at this widow's mite. It's interesting how Jesus, you know how he's so good at just kind of getting under people's skin. You know, he'll cut through all the nonsense and get down to where they really live. You ever notice that? And Dave, you want to have that one from Luke, chapter 16. And he came up to Nazareth, and where he'd been brought up, and as he was accustomed, he went into the synagogue. And that's great. That's where the story takes place. And if we go through, he starts to quote Isaiah, and then he comes to the end. He closed the book, and he said, everybody's looking at him, and he says, today this scripture's been fulfilled in your hearing. And in verse 22 it says, and all were speaking well of him, and wondering at the gracious words that fell from his mouth. Isn't that exciting? Do we get up there? Oh, they were in awe of him. And a couple verses later, so we'll go down. And so he says, I say to you that a prophet's not without honor except in his own hometown. I say to you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah. And he went to Zarephath, to a widow there, and she was the only one that he survived with and helped through the famine. And then a foreigner, far distant country, and that's where he went to survive the famine. Not one of God's chosen people. Now that's an ugly thing to say in the synagogue, isn't it? And then he says there were many lepers in Israel in verse 27. Very many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. This is an enemy, a conqueror. Man alive, this Naaman, he had a Hebrew girl that he had as a slave. And there was others that were from God's chosen people. They didn't get healed. Naaman did. And all of a sudden, people started to show what their hearts were. And all the people in the synagogue were filled with rage when they heard these things. And they got up and drove him out of the city and tried to throw him off a cliff. Now, that was offensive. But he got through to their hearts. Now, I want to take a look at the story of the widow. And been looking at this, and the thing that kind of struck me is where it happened. What was the context? And it seems lately I've been kind of struck by the geographic context of things. You know, where Jesus went, and he made some long journeys for being on foot. So we're going to start out way back at Luke. Actually, we're going to start at Luke 19 and verse 11. And it says, when they were listening to these things, Jesus went on to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and they supposed that he was going to take over right now. The kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. And so here he is, he's saying, okay, the people are waiting for him to be the conquering king. So now we're going to go over to Mark, and we're going to spend some time in Mark here. So in Mark chapter 11, verse 1, as they approach Jerusalem, so they're coming into Jerusalem, and people got excited. They're welcoming him as a conquering hero. And then down in verse 11, it says, Jesus entered Jerusalem and came into the temple, and after looking around at everything, he left for Bethany with the 12, since it was already late. It's interesting, this is the start of the week. This is Sunday, and Jesus is commuting. He's coming into Jerusalem, into the temple, and then he goes, it's late, so he's going out to Bethany. So Sunday night, he just, they had the big parade, the victory parade for him. He came in, looked around the temple, and then went back to Bethany for the evening. Monday, next day, Mark 11, 12 to 19, he came in, and he's going to clean up the temple. And they came into Jerusalem. In verse 15, he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were buying and selling in the temple. And so here we are Monday, it's cleanup time. And the whole crowd was astonished at his teaching, and evening came, he went back to Bethany. Then the next morning, they came again, or in 27 talks about they came again to Jerusalem, and he was walking to the temple, and all of a sudden things change. I call this fight day, and anybody enjoy watching boxing? Yeah, I'm a non-participant, okay? But I enjoy watching. So this looks to me just like a prize fight, because Jesus comes in, and the chief priests in round one say, "Who do you think you are? What are you doing? Under what authority are you doing this? How do you think you're going to be able to do that?" And Jesus responds to them, and he's saying, well, whose baptism was John's, and they go through, and they get down to the end of round one, and answering Jesus, they said, "We don't know." And Jesus said, "I'm not going to tell you what authority I've got then either." And he just kind of won round one. Round two, Jesus spoke a parable against them. And he goes on to tell the parable, and then they start to defend themselves. And he said, in verse 10, he said, "Have you not even read the scripture? What's the matter with you people?" And they were seeking to, in verse 12, they were seeking to seize him, for they feared the people, for they understood that he spoke a parable against them. And so they left him and went away. Ding, round three. He comes in, and the Pharisees and the Herodians, now they're going to try to trap him with the Romans, because they're going to catch him in the he's avoiding the tax, he's rebellious to the Romans, he's trying to start a mutiny, and so they sent some Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement. And they go through, who should we pay taxes? And he said, well, render to Caesar what's Caesar's, and what's to God's is God's. And so, who's made in the image of Caesar? The coin is. Who's made in the image of God? And it says they were amazed at him, and they weren't able to trap him. Ding, round four. The Sadducees come in. Now, these are authorities in Scripture, and they come in, and Mark, in chapter 18, it says, some Sadducees who say there is no resurrection came to Jesus. And then they go through and explain this guy had seven, or this woman had seven husbands, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, well, we don't believe there's a resurrection, but in the resurrection, in verse 23, when they rise again, so they're really trying to trip him up on his theology. And he goes through that God is the God of the living, and he says, you guys are so mistaken. And he just, again and again, ding, round five, the scribes. Now, these are the lawyers. These are the intelligentsia. And one of the scribes heard them arguing, and recognizing he'd answered well, said, so then, hey, you're so smart. So, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answered, love your Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And he said, yeah, that's a good answer. And so Jesus responds, as soon as somebody recognizes who he is, and says, yeah. What's Jesus' response? He said, you're not far from the kingdom. And it's interesting, the first time somebody admits defeat in this little fisticuffs, Jesus commends them, saying, you're not far. You're pretty close here. Ding, round seven. Jesus puts out a challenge to them, a puzzle to the scribes. Says, David called himself Lord. How's he then his son? And the large crowd, see, this is interesting, and the large crowd enjoyed listening to him. The religious people were really upset, but the rest of the folks, Jesus showed his love, and they enjoyed listening to him. And so he brings it to a conclusion with round 7. And Dave, have you got that up there in the Amplified? Yeah, good, thank you. In the course of his teaching, he was saying, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, displaying their prominence, and like to receive respectful greetings in the marketplaces. And they love the chief seats in the synagogues and the places of distinction and honor at banquets. These scribes who devour, confiscate widows' houses, and offer long prayers for appearance sake to impress others, these men will receive greater condemnation. That's not a great way to win friends, is to tell a story like that. Jesus exposes their hearts. He exposes the ugly that's within them. And they want to kill him because of it. And what does Jesus do? He sits down. He's relaxed. I mean, this has been quite a confrontation back and forth. And Jesus sits down, and he's totally in control. In verse 41, it says he sat down opposite the treasury and began observing how the people were putting money into the treasury. He didn't say he was observing what they were putting in, he observed how they were doing it. And many rich people were putting in large sums. And the poor widow came out and put in 2 small copper coins, which amount to a mite. Calling his disciples to him, he said, I assure you and most solemnly say to you, this poor widow put in proportionally more than all the other contributors of the treasury. For they contributed from their surplus, but she from her poverty. She gave all she had to live on. We had a little video. Do you want to play that, Dave? Have you got that ready? This is just kind of shows sort of what it's like.
Of a truth, I say unto you that this poor widow hath cast in more than they owe. For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God, but she of her penury has cast in all the living that she had.
Now, I expect that after all these confrontations, it might not be quite as calm as it looked in that scene. But this is a scene in the women's court. They would have had 13 of those. You could see a couple of those different trumpet things. They were called what were they called? They were called something, a shofars. And so there were 13 of them lined up. And they had different labels on them for different things. And so people could come and make their offering to the building fund or to the, for offerings for sacrifices or for wood or gee, that sounds like kind of the maintenance fund and the building fund and the missions fund and the women's ministry fund. It kind of sounds like to me. And so we do that same thing. But they would come in and it's interesting to me, they talked about how they gave. You know, she came in quietly and softly. And I think some of them were pretty excited to be there. Hey, it's been a good week. Hey, it's been really good. God is good. Yes, yes. I wonder, oh yeah, we got some more. I think they were pretty proud about how they were giving. They were pretty excited about what they were able to give. You folks don't look all excited about what you're giving, but that's okay. It was an opportunity. There's an opportunity to give credit to God, give honor. It may have been an opportunity also to show how blessed they were. It may have been an opportunity just to show how they wanted to be honored by others. Could be. And this widow came along and put in 2 small coins. It's interesting, just after Jesus has told the crowd to watch for this scribes who devour widows' houses. Of course, in that day, everybody knew that, ladies, I'm going to be in trouble. Everybody knew that women certainly couldn't take care of their own affairs. And so, if it was a widow, if she didn't have a son, the scribes would help out. You had to have somebody responsible that could conduct their business affairs, right? And so they go to the scribes, and some of the scribes would help conduct their business affairs, but usually it was kind of to the scribes' benefit. And so as it talks about, they basically wasted away that which they were to be taken care of. Now, is it possible that this very widow that put in the 2 small coins, is it possible that she could have been one of those who had a house, she had a husband at some point, that was squandered, that was wasted? Was she one of those that was left begging and penniless because of the scribes? See, Jesus is more concerned. It's interesting, he's more concerned about our hearts than our money. And for the scribes and the Pharisees, they had a pretty good gig going. They were concerned that this Jesus guy was going to come in and upset, because they were under Roman rule, which wasn't comfortable, but all of the people really gave them honor, and they enjoyed the wealth. They enjoyed having stuff. And Jesus was coming in and upsetting things politically, which was going to be very hazardous for them. They had control, they had wealth, they had honor, they demanded respect, and they liked it when people greeted them. Yeah, it's all right. It's good to be recognized out in the public world, isn't it? You know, they like a lot of the same things that I like. Recognition, honor, respect. You know, last week Pastor Jordan talked about loving God and loving people. And these leaders had more desire to be loved for their stuff than for loving God and for loving people. They had things kind of upside down. They were loving the wrong stuff. Wednesday night, I don't see anybody that was out Wednesday night. Wednesday night prayer, there was, I got a wee glimpse, just a wee glimpse of how hard my heart is at times. And Thursday morning, I got a phone message saying, "Are you okay?" Because God did touch me. And tonight, there are areas that my heart is hard to people. God's working through that. But when He shows us those things, it's a little painful, but at least it gives us an opportunity to make it right. The same as I talked about marriage, and it grinds away at us. And if we didn't see those things, we wouldn't know to do anything about them. So Jesus also commended her for her heart attitude. And it's interesting to me that although she was giving into a system that he had just condemned, he wasn't very kind to these guys. And yet she was giving into that world system, but her heart was pure, without regret, remorse, without anger or bitterness. She had reason to feel abused by the system. She really did. And yet she didn't exhibit any of that. Her heart was clean. She wanted to honor God. And that was the way she could display that. You know, I ran into a story. This is it was a very, very old story about a woman that was not well. Her husband had died. She had a couple kids, and this goes back a number of years when the offering plate came around and everyone kind of see what you were putting into it. Before we had these nice envelopes where we could sanitize and keep everything secret and private. And somebody had noticed that this woman really wasn't doing well. She was, taking in laundry and just doing menial tasks. And so somebody else from the church offered, and they noticed her putting her offering in each week. So somebody from the church offered, said, look, it's really pretty incidental. So I tell you what, I'll put in whatever she doesn't, but I think somebody should go talk to this woman and tell her to save her money, because that's just the right thing. That'd be good stewardship if she just save her money and spend it on groceries or something worthwhile. And so the pastor did. He followed through, and he went and talked to her. And he approached it as delicately as he could. But never before or since did I learn a lesson that taught me as I was then taught, what it meant to give. As she heard the story, tears came to her eyes, and she answered, "Do they want to take from me the comfort I experience in giving to the Lord? Think how much I owe to Him. My health is good, my children keep well, I receive so many blessings. I feel that I could not live if I did not make my little offering to Jesus each week." Discipleship and worship, that our giving and all our other acts of worship will be judged not by the amounts we give, nor by the professions we make, by doing the spirit, the motive of our giving and our doing. It's an old story, but how much do we, I was thinking earlier, as we were worshiping, oh God, I give you all, just worship you. Do I really? Is that where my heart is? Because my heart is reflected in my wallet. And I used to attend a church, and we'd gather the offering and pray over it. And used to pray something pretty nice, like, "Oh God, bless all those that gave into this offering, and Lord, bless those that couldn't give." And I could take you to the exact spot, because I started to say that one week, and it was, no, there are no people that can't give. There's only those that won't give. And there's a huge difference between can't and won't. And it's interesting that Jesus counts what's left over, not what goes into the offering. All of these other people that gave, the big spenders, the big givers, gave out of their abundance. It really wasn't going to make any difference to them and their lives if they put into that what they put into that offering. They were going to put into the offering. They're going to go home. They're going to have their servant was going to give them a nice meal, and they're going to sit down and feast a little while, and they were going to enjoy it. This woman was going to go home cold and hungry. I've heard people talk about, well, I've got bills to pay, you know. Well, I'm not sure exactly what that means. It probably means that that person has made some long-term commitments, and now they have to fulfill their commitments. So, does I have bills to pay? Does that mean it's a reflection of a lifestyle that maybe is not sustainable? I don't know. Maybe. Money represents a portion of your life. Most of us work for some place, and we get X number of dollars for putting in X number of hours of work. You could convert that $10 or $20 or $50, whatever it is, that's just a representation of an hour of your life. So money is a symbol, a representation, a piece of your life. And people lying on their deathbed, I'm sure they would pay an extra $100 to live another 3 hours or another hour. How do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? How do you spend your life? Where is your concern? Is it, Lord, I give you all my life. I give you my time. I give you my money. I give you everything? Or do we hold a bunch of it for ourselves? Are we more concerned with our own situation than with God's? I remember a fellow one time in a different church, and he said, I tithe, you know. I said, well, I didn't know, but okay. And he didn't want, it's interesting he would say that, because he really didn't want anybody to know that what he gave. And many of us put money in an envelope and we put it in. This fellow was very concerned. He gave only cash, and he would never label it because he didn't want any recognition or any knowledge or anybody to know what was going on. I honor that. I respect that. I think there's wisdom in putting money into an envelope and getting a tax receipt so you can, allowing the government to help give as well. But for him, that was his conviction that he wanted to keep it all silent. And you know, there's a part of me. We do a direct deposit in our house now, and so I never see it. We never feel it. But there's a part of me that takes a kind of a Dave Ramsey attitude to things. And you guys know who Dave Ramsey is. He's the Christian finance guy, and he says, pay cash for everything. And there's a part of me that regrets having direct deposit, because there is something about taking this offering that I could sure like to spend that on me, because I'm pretty selfish. And there's a part of taking that and putting it into the offering plate, saying, God, I would love to spend this on me, but I'm giving this to you. That act of cash, that act of depositing that, giving that envelope in, is something that frankly I miss. And but for the convenience of it, we'll continue with the other method. You know, it's really about our hearts, folks. Dave, you want to pull up Luke 11:42? And Jesus said, woe to you Pharisees, for you pay tithe of mint, rue, and cumin, And yet you disregard justice and love of God. But these are things you should have done without neglecting the others. He said, he said, you did good. But you're missing the big picture. Finances, that's the small stuff. And folks, we miss it on even the small stuff. So if we miss it on the small stuff like giving, how much more do we miss it on where our hearts are for the things of God? Where our hearts are for those that are less fortunate than us. So in Luke chapter 12, we go into the next chapter. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Like I said, your heart's reflected in your wallet. And it's interesting to me that he doesn't say where your treasure is, there your heart, where your heart is, your treasure will be. But he says where your treasure is, where you put your money. Put your money where your mouth is. Where you put your finances, that your heart is going to follow. How do we honor God with our finances? Is it a duty? Yeah, I think it is. But it's also a delight. Folks, in 1983, Jesus came into my life. And there was an impact, there was a difference that I could never repay. There was a change in me that I could never return to him. And that's far beyond all finances, beyond anything I could give to him. And so if I give a little bit into the offering, or if I give generously into the offering, that's just a little bit. Is it worth changing my lifestyle a little bit? For me, it is. I don't ever want to go back to that old life. And when I worship and I say, God, I want to worship you with all my heart, soul, strength. I try to be as honest about that as I can. And there's still a big part of me that is selfish, and I want my stuff. Like I say, Wednesday, I saw a little peek at how hard my heart is to people and what God would have us to do.